this video, we are going to take a look at evaluating Angular expressions using $eval, $parse, and $interpolate, and also understand the differences between them. So let's jump directly into the code first. So imagine I have a simple HTML page in this way. So the header is going to have all the necessary JavaScripts and styles to be imported, like the jQuery, Bootstrap, and Angular there. And on top of that, I'm also importing a01.js, which looks something like this. So as of now, all I'm having is just a simple module and just a controller with $scope already injected. And of course, I do not need this stuff. So let me remove this one. So $scope is already injected at the moment, and you can see I'm using the same controller sample right here. So we have the div and we have ng-app, we have the controller, everything in place. Now let me quickly add a couple of scope variables. So in this case, I would like to go with scope.a equal to 10, and again $scope.b equal to 20. So which means we added two variables, or say two members, to the scope itself, which can be accessible directly in your view template or even in your JavaScript as long as the scope is available. So I can quickly check whether A and B are really being data bound here by just writing something like A equal to A and at the same time B equals B. So in that way, I am trying to display the value of A and B. So let me see if this is working. So I need to go to localhost and a01.html, and now you can see I got both A with the value 10 and B with value 20. Okay, so now let us have one more expression, something like A star B to be calculated. And if you just write A star B, it just displays A star B. As we know, data binding doesn't really apply here. It just displays A star B. But my opinion here is that I really want to have something like A star B to be really calculated, or say evaluated. So whenever you put inside these braces, which means you are saying that this expression A star B needs to be evaluated based on the current scope object attached to that one. So I can also say something like the result or whatever. So this is just a caption. So this whole part is a caption. However, this expression is called as an Angular expression, and that Angular expression is going to be evaluated at runtime by the AngularJs framework itself. So whenever I say F5 here, now you can see we are actually getting result equal to 200. So which looks fine. So now let us go back here. Now I would like to have something like this, alert, and in this case result. And now if I say something like A star B, this is not going to work, because you can see A means it doesn't know what is A. So we need to specify something like scope.A into scope.B. So that can be achieved something like this, scope.A star and $scope.b. So this is the way actually we can make our scope to be useful here, as because you are trying to access the members of the scope, so you will need to be very specific. So whenever I do this, now we are going to have the alert to be displayed, which is fine. Now let me actually try to execute this alert statement using a button. So I would like to have something like scope.demo equal to function. So I'm just trying to have a function to be defined under the scope, and I would like to have this particular function to be executed as part of a button. So I would like to introduce a button right here, and let me put in HR, and I am going to say button, and as part of the button I would like to say something like demo. So this is that is just a caption, and now upon click I would like to have the demo function available inside the scope to be executed. So let me go back here and let me press F5, and the moment I say demo, you can see we got the result as 200. So still we are not using any of the eval or parse or interpolate. We are still fine without really using any of those. But now imagine I would like to have whatever the expression I gave. So something like this. I need to have this expression to be directly calculated or evaluated in the JavaScript, but not really in the markup. So I just wanted to copy this expression and I go in here. So just let me comment this guy. And now the moment if I say result plus, and if I put this, we pretty well know that this is not going to work. Why? Because A and B variables are not available. Those are available as part of scope. So you are not referring to scope here, and thus this will not be displaying anything. So let us go back here and just press F5 and click on demo. And now you can see it might be throwing some errors here. So you can see A is not defined. So similarly, B will also be providing the same error saying that B is not defined. So you are trying to access a variable without really referring to the scope, even though it belongs to that scope. Now, I do not want to provide the scope here, but at the same time, I would like to have A star B to be evaluated. So for that purpose, we can use $evaluate, and I can say, please evaluate this expression. And this expression needs to be provided in the form of a string. So what I'm saying is that please evaluate A star B. However, this A star B needs to be evaluated based on the scope. And $eval is a particular method or a function available inside $scope. So you need to use $scope in order to use $eval. So if you write $eval without $scope, it's not going to work. And at the same time, it is very important to understand that $eval works not just or not JavaScript expressions, but it works with Angular based expressions. So which means it tries to evaluate and execute those expressions, whatever we might be providing in the form of strings attached to the scope. So it is smart enough, like whenever you provide A, it has to be scope.A. If you provide B, it will be scope.B. And at runtime, it knows that this whole expression needs to be replaced right in here and execute it and give me the result out of it. So this actually gives me the result out of it. So let us save this. Or you can also place this in a variable if you would like to have something like s equal to something like this. You can put whatever, probably r. So that might seem better. And I can just display the value r. So let me go here and press F5. And now I say demo. And now you can see I have a result with 200. So that is pretty important. Which means whenever you have A star B or any kind of expression you provide here, that will be evaluated against whatever the scope you are mentioning here along with the $eval method. Okay, now that we have some understanding about $eval, so let me comment that whole thing, and now let me go to the next level. Now I would like to have the same evaluation of expression using evaluation, which looks fine. However, I would like to say something like *3. Is that even possible? Yes, it is. So it is not just only the Angular expressions. So for example, you might even be having something like this: scope.emp equals an object, and inside the object you might be having some other object like address, and inside the address I might be having something like city. So you can have all of this stuff directly by just referring the evaluation. So if you have something like this, and imagine I would like to have employee name as well, and in this case I would like to say Jag. So this is a simple object, and you can still evaluate that expression directly using eval. So sorry, I'm going a bit over. So let me see if this is working fine. So I would like to have evaluation of this expression called emp.ename, and that is still valid. So let me go to alert and R. So just would like to have the ename to be displayed, and I go back here, press F5, and the moment I say demo, you can say I got Jag. So it's just returning by evaluating that expression. So similarly, I can still say go to address and pick me the city directly from the current scope. So in this case it has to display Austin. So the moment I press F5 and demo here, you can see it is displaying Austin. So it is not just only the calculation of expressions, it really evaluates that scope related expression, Angular related expression with the current scope. Okay, so let me not focus on this one anymore. So let me go back to whatever I have here. So this is still valid. In this case, what it does is it actually multiplies A with B, which is 200, into 3, which becomes 600. So this is still valid. So let me go back here, and I just wanted to say let R. So I go back here, press F5, demo, and you can see 600 is still there, no issues. Now let us consider I am providing something like C. In this case we do not have C, because you can see I provided only A and B, but there is no C. But imagine I am providing C, and let us see what it is going to do. So press F5, press demo, and now you can see it is giving something like not a number kind of an message. And we know that why it is giving is because there is no value for C, but indeed we are trying to multiply with the value of C. But there is one advantage or one feature which is available as part of $eval, that is you can provide some local values. So which means if those particular values of those particular variables are not present in scope, those can be still taken directly from a particular object you provide in here. So I can provide a new object here saying that if it is asking for C, please take that value directly as 5. I can provide something like this. So this object will be automatically provided to eval, and eval will be taking all the values from this object first, and then it takes the rest from the scope. So this gets the preference. That is important. This gets the preference. So the object whatever you are going to have is going to have the object whatever you are going to provide is going to have all those particular members or the variables you would like to have to be provided with the values during the evaluation of that expression. So in this case, so let me F5, and now you should be able to see the C value is also made available as part of that expression. So which means I'm having 600 into 5, which is 3000. Let me do something different. Now I would like to have the A value to be replaced with 2. That is important. Which means now A value is going to be 2. As I mentioned, this object takes the precedence over the scope. So if you do not provide anything in this particular object where that particular member is available, then it falls back to the scope itself. But if you do provide a particular variable, then that takes the precedence. So I go back here, press F5, and now you can see this is actually 600 because A value is 2, B value is 20, 40 into 3, 120 into 5 is 600. So in that way, we can have the evaluation of scope to be also accomplished using some local object by falling back to scope if the respective members are not available inside the local variables. Okay, so let me have one more example. Now we can still have a particular function to be provided to an evaluation method, $eval method, where it can not only calculate anything, but it can also modify the values inside the scope. So that is still possible. So let me do something like variable R equal to something like $.scope, and I would like to use $function. So this is the end of it. But now I would like to have the function to be provided where it is going to have the scope and the locals. As I mentioned in the previous example, this object is nothing but called as locals object, which means you would like to provide some values which need to be overridden or to be taken into the consideration whenever you are providing the evaluation expression. So similarly, you can provide the locals if you'd like to have. If you don't provide locals, it will not even consider. So in this case, I can say something like return scope.a scope.b. So this is still valid. So which means you are providing a function which needs to be executed while it is trying to evaluate. So in this case, it is not an expression, but it is a function which gets evaluated or say executed. So let me see if this is working. So I go back here, and where is this? So I go back here and press F5 and press demo. And now you should be able to see 200. Okay, but again, as I mentioned, you still have the option to provide the locals. So let me get this object. Okay, let me type in. So in this case, I would like to have a to be considered as just with a value 2. So which means now the scope.a will be overwritten. Sorry, a will be still there. So let me check what we have here. So I go back here and press F5, and now you are still with 200 because you are purposefully specifying scope, but you are not just saying a here. Earlier you are not specifying scope here, so it knows that it has to fall back to a. So in this case, it needs to have scope to be referred, and thus there will not be any difference even though you provide the local variable a. But that being said, you still have the options to provide new values, something like this. So this is still valid. So which means, as C is not available inside the scope, you can just mention C, something like this. It will be automatically taken from the local variable, that is C right here. So I go back here, press F5, and the moment I do this, well, okay, I have to write locals. That is important. So you can see this whole object is actually gone into this particular variable called locals. You can also say L, whatever you would like to have. So you have to provide locals. So that is important. Locals.c. Then you are literally getting the value from this C. So now I go over here and press F5, and now you should be able to see 400. So that is important. So this object is actually passed into this variable, and you are referring that variable. So this one is nothing but your $scope that will be automatically passed into this variable called scope. You can also provide S, whatever you would like to have, and you are using that. If you have a something like 3, you can still use that right here, saying that I would like to have locals.a to be used. So in this case, you can see 10 into 20, which is this 200, into a value of C, which is 400, and 400 into 3, it has to give me 1200. So let me go back here, and now whenever I say demo, you can see I have 1200. So in that way, now you have access to both scope and also the locals without really overwriting each other. But if you do not use a function, but indeed just provide the locals, there is a chance that it might be overwriting the values in the existing scope, as because the locals will be taken into the precedence whenever you use this expression. But if you provide a function, you are still, or you are in full control of both scope and also the locals you provide. Okay, so that is pretty much about the evaluation in general. So that is using $eval. So there is nothing much we can cover about $eval at the moment. So let me call this one as demo eval, so that we are pretty sure of what's happening here. So I wanted to call this one as demo eval. Okay, so we are done with eval. So let me jump to parse. So let me create a new thing called demo parse, and I would like to call the function. So let me have the function to be written. And of course, we know that we always can do scope.a into scope.b, and that is not what we are after here. We are really after this kind of expression. So let me try to use this kind of expression here. So first of all, again, you can use $parse directly. However, we should be actually injecting it. So we need to have $parse to be injected here and use that right here. So which means that injection is made available through this variable. So this could be any variable like a or b, not even a dollar symbol. So I go in here. Now you are actually using that one here. So you need to use that variable here. And whenever you use it here, which means you are saying that please evaluate this expression. But there are some things which we need to understand where this parse is really doing. The first thing is that $parse, even though it says it is trying to evaluate this, it doesn't really return a result. It actually returns a function. It is just a template function, you can call it as, because $parse is not working on the scope. If you can see $eval, it is really working on the current scope. But in this case, $parse doesn't really work with any context or any scope or with any data. It really evaluates that particular function, that particular expression, and gives us the function. And now you can use this function to apply against a scope or any kind of other objects, like even this object, your locals object, anything. So this is pretty important. This actually returns a function. That is very important. Once you have the function, now you can use that function to actually apply against a scope, something like this. Now, once this is applied in this way, it is going to give the result, and you can then store the result into a variable. So which means $parse always gives a function, and then you can use that function any number of times to apply against any kind of object. It doesn't need to be just a scope. So I can say function of $scope, and immediately again I can say function of root scope, and again function of object O or object emp, whatever. So the same function can be used a multiple number of times in various different contexts of data. But eval is different. Eval can always work only with the current scope. Okay, now that we have the result, so let me display the result by saying something like result equals plus R, and see if this is working fine. And of course I need to have demo parse to be actually added to my button. So I would like to have one more button, and let me have a break tag here, and in this case I would like to call it as demo parse, and let me have parse here as well. So I go back here, press F5, and I should be having a new button here, demo parse, and now you can see I have 200. So that is important. I think I have a typo somewhere, result right here. Okay, so we can make it short actually. Instead of having three different variables, three different statements, I can actually make all of those available in single statement by just writing something like result equals, first of all I try to parse the expression a star b, which results a function, and that particular function can be used to actually go against the scope. So most of the time whenever you are going through online samples, you are going to see this expression, which is nothing but, if you split it, you are going to have something like this. So this one statement is actually identical to almost all of these three. So I go back here, press F5, and the moment I say demo parse, you can see still I have the same result. Okay, so that is in simple whenever you consider a particular parsing. So let me do it with not just the scope, but with any other object. Yes, we can still do with any other object. Now instead of providing a scope, I can say please do against my particular object. I'm going to say a value as 2 and b value as 3. Yes, this is still valid. Now what I'm saying is that please evaluate this a star b based on the values whatever you come or whatever you get from this object. So if this object is scope, it tries to fetch from scope. If it is not from scope, just provide whatever you would like to have here, as long as it has the variables a and b. And now it is going to display 2 into 3, which is nothing but 6. So I go in here, you can see I have 6. So in that way you can use the same function, or I can say something like, let me use this one. So I would like to have the same function to be used against both. So now I would like to say alert function. So let me say R1 here, so that says result 1, and I would like to call this one as R2, and in this case I do not want this whole stuff, but instead I would like to have this particular object, just the object alone, to be used instead of the scope. So I just get rid of this and use that right here. Now let me display R2. So what I'm saying is that in this case, this function is actually going after scope and evaluating against the scope gives the result of R1 in the form of R1. So which means as it goes after scope, it is going to display A into B from the scope, which is nothing but 10 into 20 is 200. And now I'm using the same function f, but not with the scope, but with a different object. And now I'm saying please evaluate A star B from this object, which is 2 into 3 against 6. And now you are going to see two different results from the same expression being evaluated using two different context objects. So let me go back here, press F5, and now if you press this one, the first value is 200 and the second value is 6. So that is how you can use the same expression to be used on multiple context of objects, either scope or anything whatever you provide here. So that is just another example. Okay, now coming to even this kind of expression, where is that? I have this. So imagine I would like to use this one. Yes, we can still use that. So if I go in here, so let me say something like alert, and I would like to use that. So I do not need any of this stuff. I just would like to have $parse to be used. So I'm saying please parse this particular expression directly using the scope. So this is still valid. So I just go back here, press F5, and okay, I'm missing some bracket here. So okay, so this is an error. Okay, so let me press F5, and the moment I say this, you can oh, okay, Austin, this is the one. So I have one more alert somewhere which is still working. So let me actually comment that one too. And now you can see I have Austin being evaluated directly from the scope even through parse. So whether or not you use eval, you can still use $parse. And the most important thing is that even if you use $eval, behind the scenes AngularJs uses $parse. So which means if you use $eval, all it does is it uses $parse with $scope. So it is still the same. If you are always going after the scope, it is best readable just by using $eval. But if the case is like you would like to have multiple kinds of context to be executed based on the necessary expression, you can just go with parse. Again, I just wanted to mention $eval behind the scenes uses $parse. Okay. Now let us use, there is one more benefit of using $parse, that is you can actually modify the values from parse. So which means you can provide certain values which can be directly modified to the object. So let me see this. So I have this city. So in this case the city value is Austin. We know that it is going to display Austin, no doubts. But let us consider I would like to modify that particular value of city using parse. Yes, you can still do that. So I can say $parse emp.address.city, and there is a function called assign, and that assign is automatically available the moment you parse it. As you know, whenever you execute this one, it actually results in a function. That function internally has another function called assign, and I can say assign to the scope object with a new value called Dallas. So I can provide something like this. And now again let me use the same alert. So here in this case it actually goes to Austin. However, here you are saying that please modify the value available in city in scope with a new value called Dallas. And once it has modified, you can see while we are executing this, it should display Dallas but not Austin as it did earlier. So let me press F5 here and go in here, and you can see the first one is always going to be Austin and the next is Dallas. That is pretty important. Okay, so Not only that, let me go in here. So let me do some simple thing here. So I would like to have the scope to be actually displayed here. So I would like to go after this expression emp.address.city. So let me do this. Okay. So and okay, so I go back here. So let me not put any of the alerts here. So all I'm saying is whenever I click on the button, it has to just modify the scope, and in the scope go to this path and just modify the value to Dallas. And I go back here, press F5, and you can see by default I already have Austin. The moment I click on it, you can see it came with Dallas. So the digest cycle has been already performed here, so that is important. So if you are using assign, the digest process is automatically going to be kicked in. You can also call digest process or digest cycle or digest loop, whatever you call it as, is kicked in. So this is pretty important. And if you are not familiar with the digest process or digest cycle, please refer to my previous video which covers that part in very much depth. Okay, so this is pretty much what we can cover about parse. So $parse, which needs to be always injected at the very top and can be worked with any scope or any other object, and it can also be used to actually modify the values. Okay, so let me do this one in the scope. Yes, can we modify values inside the scope? We can. So let me do that. We can modify the values inside $eval as well whenever you are using the functions. So in this case, I can also say something like scope dot c equal to locals dot c. Even that is possible. So what I'm saying is that please get the value from here using locals, get the value out of it and assign to c. And now instead of using this statement, I can say instead of local c, I can now say scope.c. Even this is possible. So you can still modify the values inside the scope using eval by writing your own function. So this is still possible. So let me see if this is working. So I go to this and now it is still giving 1200 as I mentioned. So A is still considered 10 into 20 is 200 into C, that is 400 into locals.a, which is nothing but this guy. So 400 into 3 becomes 1200. So in that way you can still modify the values using either eval or using parse, where from the parse you have the the assign statement right there. I mean assign function. Okay, so that is pretty much about $eval on $parse. And now it is time to work with Interpolate. So let me add one more function, just the way I did earlier. And instead of calling this one as demo parts, I just would like to call this one as Interpolate. And let me add a new button just for this case. So let me add something like this. Let me get $interpolate right here, and I just would like to call this one as Interpolate. Okay, so what is so different about Interpolate? So let us see what's going on. So let me get whatever I had earlier. So let me get this stuff. Okay, and now I need to use Interpolate. So I just wanted to use Interpolate. And again, when we are using Interpolate, that needs to be injected at the very top. So I need to have something like this. And now I also need to have Interpolate something like this. So you can use any variable, I or $I, whatever you use. The same thing you provide there needs to be used right here. Okay, so I'm using Interpolate and I'm trying to actually evaluate some expression and again execute the same thing again as the scope and would like to have the result. There is no difference right now, as you can see, this parse and even the Interpolate. So let us see if this is working fine first. So press F5 and now you can see I got a new button and you can see how it is working. It just displayed as if it is a string. Yes, it is, because this parse takes the string as an expression, but here you need to provide an expression. Again, the string whatever you provide here itself is an Angular expression, but in this case it is just treated as a string containing an expression. So if you'd like to evaluate this, you literally have to use how you are using right here. So you can use this whole statement, or say whole syntax, or this particular message, however you are using in the view, the same thing you can use it right here. So I can say, please do that right here. So I can say something like this, which means it actually interpolates, which means it translates and evaluates all the Angular expressions it found inside the string. That is important. So here you are directly providing the Angular expression, but here you are providing a string which may contain one or more Angular expressions, and thus behind the scenes this interpolate works with $parse again. So whenever interpolate finds any of these Angular expressions, those Angular expressions will be automatically executed or evaluated by $parse, and then further the results will be returned back to $interpolate. And just like $parse, $interpolate also returns an function, and that function can be executed against any of the scope or any of the objects you provide, and finally we should be having the result. In this case I do not need result here because you are already providing the same caption here. So let me get rid of this result here. And let me go back here and press F5, and the moment I say interpolate, now you have the result right here. So which means you have the expression to be evaluated right here. And let me do something different. I would also like to have not just this result, but some other result. Of course, this is some stupid calculation I would like to provide here. So I would like to have something like A star B star something like 10 or something. So which means 200 into 10 becomes 2000. So I need to have this whole string to be evaluated along with Angular expressions. Yes, that can be still done. So I go back here, press F5, and you can see I still have all the expressions within the same string, all the Angular expressions within the same string being evaluated and provided along with whatever the scope you provided here. Okay. So now that we have some understanding about the interpolate here, yes, just like our parse, you can actually push or make everything available in one statement. So let me do this and just have one alert which says something like $interpolate, and I can just do this. And now after that I can provide $scope right here. So which means I would like to have that particular expression to be evaluated against scope. So I go back here, press F5, and I click on here, I get the result. Okay, so just like parse, you are using interpolate here, except that the interpolate actually works with strings and all the Angular expressions mixed up. So let me go to the next level. It is not just only the Angular expressions. The expressions can also contain the filters, Angular filters, if you'd like to include as part of the Angular expressions. If you are not familiar with Angular filters, please refer to my previous videos. But in this case, imagine I would like to use a currency filter, which I would like to use to decorate the expression related value, whatever it might be evaluated. So in this case, I would like to use alert in the same way I did earlier, but whatever the value I get out of this A star B needs to be formatted using that particular filter called currency with a value something like this. So let me go back, press F5, and go to interpolate, and now you can see I have USD dollar sign and that 200. So you can provide any filter here. So if you're using strings, you can have different kind of filters. If you're using dates, you can have years and so on to be actually fetched from the filters. So filters are one of the most important things available in AngularJS, and you can also use your custom filters if necessary here also. But this feature of evaluation using the filters is not available in $eval or $parse. So that is the feature available only for the Interpolate. And that is pretty much whatever we have seen as part of Interpolate. And again, there are a couple more things which we need to understand. Interpolate always uses $parse behind the scenes. $eval also uses $parse behind the scenes. And finally, $interpolate cannot change the values of the respective context. So which means if you provide $scope, Interpolate is just always read only. So you can see in the parse you can actually use .assign, but in the case of Interpolate you do not have any assign. You cannot change the values for that particular context object you provide, whether it is $scope or some arbitrary context object, like one simple object, whatever we provided in this case, like this. So we cannot use any of those particular objects to really change the values using Interpolate. That is available only as a feature for $parse using assign, or you can use $eval with your own function you actually can provide. Okay, so this is pretty much about $eval, $parse and $interpolate.